The Shark Deck.
I had a fantastic time at trivia on Wednesday night. Hi, I'm Johnny Mack with your daily comedy news. I'll tell you one of the trivia questions that made me happy, and I'll tell you the answer in the second half. All right, ponder this one. The category, stage names. It's a comedian who uses a name that could be a woman, could be a man. For example, Tracy Morgan. That is not the correct answer. I want you to ponder, whose real name is Eric Bishop? Dave Chappelle, big time in the news. If you missed yesterday's podcast, he's overshadowing himself. This week was the 20th anniversary of Chappelle's show, debuting on Comedy Central, January 22nd, 2003. TV Insider profiled the show and reminded us after the first episode and the closing Clayton Bigsby sketch, which introduced the concept of a black white supremacist, audiences were forced to sit up and pay attention to the man responsible for making them laugh so hard. Not only is the sketch edgy, but it also showcases the silliness of racism as an idea, how anyone is susceptible to being racist, and juggles the subject while remaining humorous. Dave Chappelle became a household name. People began to go back to his earlier HBO special, which has since become a classic. Chappelle's show earned Emmy nominations for Outstanding Variety Music or Comedy Series and Outstanding Writing for a Variety Music or Comedy Program. The first season sold 2 million DVD units in its first year, making it the best-selling DVD ever during that time. I know the man. I'm friends with the guy who did that deal, and he's had a very, very successful career, and that was one of the first huge things that he did. TV Insider writes, Chappelle's show did more than give a platform for the creator ratings for the network and 2 copycat series. Mind of Mencia, I'll agree with that. That's a complete Chappelle show minus Chappelle plus Carlos Mencia. And Key and Peele, I don't think Key and Peele is a copycat of Chappelle's show at all. It introduced longtime comedic talents Charlie Murphy, Donnell Rawlings, and Bill Burr to audiences. Charlie Murphy was known for putting in the work as a comic and actor, despite having an ultra-famous brother in Eddie Murphy. And his True Hollywood Story segments were breakthrough moments for his career alongside his Time Haters routine. Donnell Rawlings also saw success as a time hater, but didn't catch on as a highlight collaborator until the World Series of Dice sketch from season 2. That one showcased Ashy Larry for the first time. Bill Burr appeared in Guys Night Out and the Racial Draft sketches. True Hollywood Stories reintroduced the world to Prince and Rick James by telling tales of their early escapades and another side of their personality. After those sketches, both artists portrayed by Chappelle, another wave of their career manifested as those portrayals and the accompanying I'm Rick James bitch became an overused phrase in popular culture. Meanwhile, Prince and Chappelle became actual friends. Prince found the portrayal funny, and when Chappelle left the show, Dave said Prince was the only person he could relate to, who understood he wasn't crazy for walking away. Another person who was reintroduced to audiences, Paul Mooney. Paul saw a second wave of popularity thanks to his Negrodamus character and the Ask Paul Mooney segments. TV Insider writes, in the spirit of Paul Mooney, Dave Chappelle was looking to have honest discussions based on current topics focused on touchy subjects. Although the purpose of any sketch show is to make audiences laugh, Chappelle was interested in using humor to open the floor for critical thinking and subsequent discourse. And it did just that. It examined the actions of George Bush and how his actions would be reflected as a black president. That was way before Barack Obama. There's no show on TV holding up a magnifying glass to society and what ails us as a nation these days. There's no Twilight Zone with life lessons or Chappelle's show to make it all go down with laughter. The article then talks about Dave's later career and some of the recent controversies, which was well discussed yesterday. And they finish up with Chappelle's show was a ship in the grand sea of 2000s culture. It brought up an entire generation of teens and spearheaded several careers in the process. It shaped what comedy was during its time and delivered sketches that remain in the lexicon of all Americans today. It should be celebrated on its 20th anniversary, as its impact can never be duplicated again. But if Chappelle isn't careful, it may end up on the list of problematic things we shouldn't revisit due to its creator. Wow. Philadelphia Weekly, they've been doing great comedy-related articles lately. They had caught up with Donnell Rawlings. And they asked Donnell, hey, gossip sites popped up with your supposed complaint about the money you were paid or not paid from Dave Chappelle. I know you guys are friends. Let's fix this. Donnell said, cool, because I never said that. Lots of media outlets, they just like clickbait. I never said that I didn't get a proper payday. I got the payday that was fair for what we were doing at that level at that time. I'd never complain about that. That show gave me a platform to then go out and make a lot of money. Nobody on that show was getting paid anything crazy those first 2 seasons. It wasn't until the 3rd season when Dave got the check for the big money, which he probably never saw because he left. But it was never a situation for me to complain about the money. We each got $500 a sketch to be on one of the finest comedy shows in history. You got to pick your fights. This one isn't mine. I was happy to take that money, build a relationship with Dave, and further my platform in stand-up comedy. That's where I can make it, so I get the big money. That's the lesson. Always position yourself for the next shot. Donnell continued, here's a story. Patrice O'Neal was on the Chappelle show, and he had a problem with the money. He didn't want to do it anymore because he didn't like the money. But look at what sketches like The Player Haters Ball did for the history of comedy. Look at all that stuff. You have to make your decisions based on the next move. We'll have a new Marc Maron special very soon. February 11th is how I define very soon. It's called From Bleak to Dark. In the trailer, Marc Maron says, I don't want to be negative, but I don't think anything's ever going to get better ever again. This was shot in December at New York City's Town Hall. Maron opens up about the loss of his partner, filmmaker Lynn Shelton. One of the jokes from the special, I know a lot of you know that during COVID, my girlfriend passed away. It was the most horrible thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm sure to her. Maz Jobrani is playing Chicago tonight. On this tour, he's taking a few minutes at the end of every show to discuss the massive protests currently taking place in his native land of Iran. Maz says in September, there was a 22-year-old girl named Hamini who was walking in the streets of Tehran, and her hair was out of her hijab just a little bit. The morality police stopped her, arrested her, and proceeded to kill her. That's what set off the protests in Iran and around the world. They've killed around 500 people, including around 50 minors, and they've imprisoned around 15,000, who they've started to execute just recently. If you're on my Instagram, you will see sometime around September when these protests started. I feel like I went from being a comedian to being an activist. Maz Jobrani is 50. He fled with his family from Iran at the age of 6 in 1979. He moved to Northern California. He fell in love with Eddie Murphy's comedy at the age of 10 and was determined to pursue a comedy career. He felt the, quote, usual immigrant pressure of becoming a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, but he made the leap into entertainment at age 26. Maz told the Chicago Sun-Times, I studied political science in college, and I got into a PhD program intending to be a professor. But meanwhile, I wanted to keep doing comedy. I was 26 years old, and I decided to take an improv class, which led to a stand-up comedy class, and that just led to everything else. I became a regular at the Comedy Store in LA, and then a regular at the Laugh Factory, and I started going up every night. Eventually, I started touring, and I've had the chance to see the world because of comedy. I've done stand-up in Australia and Europe, the Middle East and Asia, you name it. I still have to go to Africa. Maz Jobrani's at the Den Theater tonight, 7:30. 2 shows tomorrow, 7:30 and 9:45. Fortune Feimster's in Albuquerque tonight. This kicks off her Live, Love, Laugh tour. It's the first stop on her tour. She said, you guys are the first. I didn't get to Albuquerque on my last tour. We're making good on it. She was touring at the end of 2022, didn't get much of a break, saying, I'm juggling in the stand-up comedy world and acting. There's nothing better than the live performance. To get ready for the new show, she's been working out at LA comedy clubs, doing 15 minutes at a time. She explains, then I began to do a whole hour at clubs, the structure and the jokes. I build the process to where it's entertaining. When the material's ready to go, it's such a proud moment. This one is a bit of a sequel to her last tour. She says the show picks up into married life. I'm talking more about my mom again. My jokes are from what it's like being a married woman. I'll also throw in some nostalgic pieces. I always try to tell stories from my own life that are relatable to others. Fortune Feimster's Live, Love, Laugh tonight at the Kiva Auditorium, Albuquerque, 7 o'clock. Did you get the trivia answer? The question was Eric Bishop. That's his real name. What is his stage name? The answer, Jamie Foxx. I was so happy when this came up. So we play trivia on Wednesday nights, and my team was in 15th place. There's 5 rounds. We were in 15th after 3 rounds. We went 8 for 8 in the 4th round, passed a bunch of teams. And we were only 5 points back out of getting one of the prizes. They get prizes to the top 3. So the first 4 rounds, you get a point if it's correct and 0 if it's wrong. So that's fine. In the 5th round, it's 3 for a correct, -2 for an incorrect, or you can leave it blank and get a 0. So there's a lot of points to be had. And when the trivia guys asked the question, Eric Bishop, who's he go by? I was like, the karma is on point tonight. My team is like, you sure? I'm like, I know the guy, name dropper, but I know the guy. I know Eric Bishop. You know him as Jamie Foxx. I'm like, 100%. This is good. So we got 7 out of 8. We left the 8th one blank. Finished in 2nd place. Won some prizes. Got our picture taken with the trivia guys. Hi, trivia guys. If you want to check out their podcast, if you actually want to hear this, if you want to play the game, they have a podcast called Best Men Trivia. So check that out. Also, there's 2 main trivia guys, and then sometimes one of them can't make it, and like this 3rd guy subs in. 3rd guy is one of the hosts of SNL Nerds, which is a podcast about Saturday Night Live. So you want to check out SNL Nerds and check out Best Men Trivia. If you support the show on buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews, I'm mad at the National Donuts chain today. Every now and then they do this nonsense where you order an iced coffee, and what you wind up with is clearly a hot coffee poured over ice. Not the same thing. I might have to switch to that green chain, Kenny. But that's an extra 10-minute drive. They got to open one closer to me. Sketchfest has kicked off in San Francisco. One of the performers is Annette Mullaney. She'll never forget her first time killing it in front of a stand-up comedy crowd in 2016. She said, "I felt like I was both in the moment and my brain was thinking ahead, and it was the greatest high of my life. I've been chasing it ever since." Let's skim the schedule real quick. Let's see. Who's playing tonight? Moshe Kasher, Natasha Leggero at 7:30 with Reggie Watts. At that same time, Maria Bamford and Jenny Yang have their own show. Also at 7:30, River Butcher. Also at 7:30, something called Stop Joking for 100 Years and Other Requests from My Kid. Janine Garofalo, Bobcat Goldthwait, Dana Gould, Eugene Merman, Marilyn Ricecub, Baron Vaughn. That's like 4 awesome options just at 7:30. I'm not going to read the whole schedule to you here. It's a show at 10:15 with a title cracking me up called Diversity Hires. Now looking ahead to the weekend, 1 o'clock on Saturday, Futurama versus COVID 3019. It's the cast of Futurama. That should be good. We'll get some good news out of that. Also at 1 o'clock, 20th anniversary of A Mighty Wind. Christopher Guest and Michael McKean will be there. 4 o'clock, a second appearance of the Futurama guys. Also at 4, the 6-year anniversary of the 10-year anniversary of the Eugene Merman Comedy Festival. Janine Garofalo, Bobcat, Eugene Merman, Baron Vaughn, Sarah Vowell, Reggie Watts. It's real strong. And there's a ton of shows all the way to 11 o'clock at night. Quick look at Sunday. 1 o'clock kicks off the day, a Sketchfest tribute to Lorraine Newman, Fred Armisen, Dana Gould, and of course, Lorraine Newman. And this thing goes all the way through next weekend, so I'll be talking about that a lot. sfsketchfest.com if you want to check out the schedule. On your Netflix today, You People, starring Eddie Murphy and some others. The Washington Post gave it 3.5 stars out of 5. They called You People a masterclass in race relations delivered as a comedy. The Washington Post writes, "Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and watch the fireworks, including one literally inflammatory scene in which Ezra's neurotic mother, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, never better," writes the Washington Post. Now, think about how great Julia Louis-Dreyfus is in things, and I don't only mean Seinfeld. She's really good in things. If she's never been better, wow. Eddie Murphy's character, the dad, is a Muslim convert, and they have a prickly dinner table conversation that jumps from slavery to the Holocaust. Washpo writes, You People is more than anything a showcase for 2 comic giants. Eddie Murphy as Akbar Mohammed, who was born as Woody, whose slow burn effort to undermine the lovebirds' wedding plans, even going so far as to crash Ezra's bachelor party, is barred with deadpan quips and a delight in making his future son-in-law squirm. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Shelley Cohen, whose strenuous virtue signaling as well-meaning Brentwood liberal backfires, in the most cringingly amusing ways. Sounds like that might actually be good. 3.5 stars out of 5, though. Who knows? From the Beijinger, your home for comedy news. You know, as I'm doing this, I probably messed up because I forgot about time zones. I was going to go tell you to see Shanghai-based comedian Han Q in Beijing tonight. Now, I realize not very many of you listen in Beijing, but by the time you're hearing this, it was probably 18 hours ago. Oops, sorry. Anyway, let me tell you about Shanghai-based comedian Han Q. I got to remember about the time zones. The Beijinger asked him, how long have you been doing stand-up? And he said, I've been a full-time comedian for 2 years now. I was fascinated by Louis C.K. and Bill Burr when I was in college. Then I got involved with a comedy group in my school. They had a regular open mic every week, and I went to most of them for 4 years. It was 2016. We didn't have a real audience because it was a college student open mic and people just brought their friends, which I would not recommend. Don't invite your friends to watch your open mics. In fact, don't invite your friends to comedy shows at all. If they love comedy shows, they'll do it for themselves. I try to forget most of it, but I do remember I was too nervous to finish my words. I got like maybe a couple chuckles for 3 minutes. Then I had to take a whole month off to recover from that. Louis C.K. and Bill Burr have shown me that a funny joke can change people's opinions on things and make them start to rethink certain culture. I remember when I was watching Louis C.K.'s 2017 special, he showed me how to tackle social topics in the funniest way so that no one will feel lectured to. Han Q was actually featured on Bill Burr's podcast. How did that happen? Han said, I've been his podcast listener for years. On one podcast, he was looking for jokes from other countries about America, so I sent mine in. I didn't expect that he was going to see it, but I was really excited and appreciative when he read it to all his listeners. It shows how Bill Burr is still nice about new comedians and still appreciative of a good joke when he sees one. Tonight and tomorrow, the Disabled List Comedy Festival. Dan Hurwitz said, I'm Jewish, black, and disabled. One of the things I noticed in the Seattle scene and in general is you don't see a lot of spaces, or any spaces really, for people with disabilities. He teamed up with Kayla Brown to organize this thing and said, we didn't really know if there was an audience for it, and I didn't know how many disabled comedians there were. That's also been one of the beautiful things about putting the show on. You kind of realize all these people who are part of the disabled community you didn't realize were part of it. It's a mixture of people who were kind of already in the Seattle community who I either knew were disabled or learned were disabled. The recruitment process has invited Brown and Hurwitz to examine the nuances of what it means to have a disability. Brown notes that not everyone may identify as having a disability, especially if their disabilities are invisible or related to mental illness. Brown said, it's really a personal choice whether you want to identify as being disabled. That's the kind of difference between the disability community and other communities of marginalized identities. Brown said, one of the problems we've had from the start is so many venues in Seattle and everywhere are inaccessible. There's so many really cool spots that are in the basement or just somewhere that people with ambulatory difficulties can't go. But accessibility is more than that. There's more than making sure people can physically get there. It's also making sure that if they're deaf, they can have an interpreter or captions, both of which we'll have at the festival. The lineup includes Seattle regulars Greta Gimp and Seattle International Comedy Competition veteran Sherry Hardman, as well as Crystal Liston, who got her start in comedy with the Disabled List. Hurwitz says, we place a premium on not being hateful. These performers are all people we trust not to be jerks, but there is edginess. Audiences can expect sex jokes, and Disabled List performers are not afraid to talk about taboo subjects. Also tonight, if you're in Providence from Cranston Online, it's the Ivy League of Comedy. Sean, Eli, Andy Pitts, and Liz Mealy are doing the show at 8 o'clock. Eli is the founder of the group. Sean Eli said, I was working at a bank and I started doing stand-up comedy. My comedy was clean, and colleagues and clients would come to see me at comedy clubs. They would tell me my comedy's clean, and while they didn't object to the other comedians' material, they wanted to take clients for a corporate event, and they were looking for clean comedy shows. There weren't any. And as a business major, I realized there's a demand for this product and there doesn't seem to be a supply, so I started putting together clean shows. I also wanted a very corporate-sounding name, so I called it Ivy League Comedy. My original goal was to have comedians from the Ivy League, but I realized there's only 8 of us, so that wasn't going to work. We were going to theater one day to do a show, and they put on the marquee, the Ivy League of Comedy. Again, he originally called it Ivy League Comedy. The Ivy League of Comedy. My first thought was they got the name wrong, and my second thought was, oh, that name is better. So then I changed the name of my group to the Ivy League of Comedy. We do clean shows at theaters, corporate events, charity fundraising events, all sorts of places. Sean pushes back on the notion that stand-up comedy is hard. He says, there are people who teach handicapped children to fight fires. I stand on a box and talk into a stick. The worst that'll ever happen to me is nobody laughs and I'll go home crying. He also points out in comedy that it's different in that you might get to work with somebody super famous. He says, let's say you're a low-level professional tennis player. You don't get to team up with the greatest tennis players around in doubles. If you're a minor league baseball player, you don't get to play with a big club until you get promoted. In stand-up comedy, I get to work with some of the funniest people in the world, and it's great. One more today. It's a long one again. Ricky Gervais, I really appreciate that he uses his celebrity to try and make the world a better place. I was on Twitter this morning and I saw Ricky Gervais release this 30-second statement via the Humane Society International, and I will share it with you.
20 years ago, the UK became the first country to ban cruel fur farming. But now, 20 years later, it still has blood on its hands by allowing fur imports. That's millions of animals still suffering for fur fashion that's sold here. So my message to the UK government is simple. End this double standard and ban fur imports. Thanks.
And that's your comedy news for today. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your shows. See you tomorrow. Did you hear about the border collie who recycles trash when he's out on his walks? Or how about the bear that stole someone's Chick-fil-A, but good news, left the salad behind? Hi, I'm Johnny Mac, host of 5 Good News Stories. Don't worry, I have stories about humans too, like there's a woman who makes a living because she looks like Jim Carrey. It's my podcast. It's 5 Good News Stories. 5 Good News Stories, the number 5 Good News Stories, twice a week. 5 Good News Stories. Oh, and Shamrock Shakes are back too. Good news. 5 Good News Stories, wherever you get your shows.